It's February 5th. And as Rabbi Kelman said, today will be the last class on Rabbi Bamberger. So let me finish up first with the things that I had not so much on my table in the back, and then move into Rabbi Bamberger. The first thing, I've had this for I don't know how long. I listened to an earlier class, and I think I said, if I recall, because that's why I kept what I'm going to show you, that we are talking about S and Shin and Sin and Lithuania. They didn't do that. And of course, already you see in Sefer Shoftim. In fact, I'll show you here. A second. Let's see. Sefer Shoftim. This is in chapter 12. In verse Savav 6, it says, they said to them, say Shibolet. And when he said Sibolet, he couldn't pronounce it, so that's what Ephraim, they couldn't pronounce it, so they knew that they could kill him. So one of you commented, and I think I think I said that I don't know of any evidence that this continued in the Talmudic times. I don't know. However, what I should have mentioned is that in medieval times we had the same thing. Here is Radak on this very pasuk, where Radak explains what's going on there, and then he says, explaining, Shin and Sin, this is like the people of France. Zek kamo anshe Tzarfat, she'enan mevnim likro hashin v'korim otav kamo tafrafa. They pronounce the Shin like a tough without a dagesh, like a sin, like we do. We pronounce, tough and suf. So here we see that they pronounce the Shin. We see, for example, that the Radak is saying that they did not pronounce a tough like a tough. They pronounced it like they did the Shin, which it would be like a S. So I think that's worthy of note. And we see, if you look in the early writings, when they refer to Paris, well, how is Paris, how do we write it? It's written with not with a Zion. Classically, it's written with a sin. But that they would have pronounced it. They would pronounce it not with a shin, but with a sin. Okay. Next thing I want to do, a couple people ask me, what's these decrees? If we do a class on Hungarian Orthodoxy, we'll get into great detail, but I just want to read you off, because I mentioned it already a few times, and MJ Frankel has already commented a few times. These are the decrees that were made in Hungary, and this is what made you Orthodox in Hungary. Very different, of course, what we'll see in Germany, or what we have seen. Number one, 9 decrees that were at this big conference they had in Michalovitz. You can't have a drasha bilshon umos ha'olam, not in the vernacular. Last time I was in the Budapest synagogue, the drasha is still in Yiddish, except when there are a lot of Israelis, they do it in Hebrew, but Hungarian can't be done. 2, you can't enter a synagogue asher ein la bima be'emtza, which doesn't have a bima in the middle. Rabbi Hartman, I see you now. I don't know if you were there when I greeted you a minute ago, saying how happy I was to see you this weekend. But this raises a question about the Sharon shul. The bima's in the middle, but it's in the middle between the men. That is, the bima's in the back. It's a shul that the mechitza's at the back for the men. So the bima's in the middle because it's at the back of the men's section. So if you look at the whole shul, it's in the middle, but it's not in the middle of the men's section. So is that considered bima be'emtza or not? It's a good question. I don't know if the Hungarians, if they would step into the shul. I'm not sure. They have to determine. You can't make a base knesses b'migdal, like a tower. I think it means like a steeple, maybe. 4, you can't have mabushim miyuchadim l'shatz u'mashorim. You can't have special clothes for the chazan and the mashorerim. Naftali mentioned this. This is not a choir. I'm not exactly sure the difference between a mashorer and a choir, but we'll see there's a difference. They can't wear special garbs, which will be domim l'shar nimuse datot, that are similar to others. So we know in Germany they wore these gowns. Forbidden. 5, you can't make a mechitza that you can see the women. We spoke about this, that you have to have the lattice work. And when I say mechitza, it's up there. Here's 6, asor lishmoa tefillah choir. You can't even go in to listen to the choir. Certainly, you can't daven with them and say Amen. And if you're forced by this to daven b'yachidos, stay home. 7, shuls that are called choir shuls. You can't enter it. Not only to hear it, you can never enter it even during the week. So those of you coming with me to Central Europe this summer, if you have good Hungarian stock, when actually it's not me saying this, Schneier Lyman, he has a tape I listened to when he brought a group to Budapest once. It's on YU Torah. He says, all of you from this Hungarian Orthodox background, we're going into the Rouhani synagogue. You stay outside because that's your. Of course, he meant it jokingly because no one's staying outside. But that's you cannot step foot in such a show like that, according to them. 8, no weddings in the shul. And 9th, and this is what the 9th decree was. By the way, some of the rabbis didn't like this. The Maram Shik said he didn't agree with all this, but since the other rabbanim said you have to do it, he has to go along with them. Azariah Hildesheimer battled against this, but when he saw he wasn't getting anywhere, I guess he decides to leave Hungary and go to Germany. But listen to the last one. And I'm wondering why you need the other 8 when you have the last one. Asur l'shanos shum minhag yahadus. You can't change any Jewish practice. Basically, you can't make any changes in anything. So as long as you have that, then you don't really need the other ones. But okay, they wanted that. That sums it up. I said last class, we spoke briefly about Mila, bris Mila for people, for in an intermarried couple. Can you, the father's not Jewish, the mother's Jewish, the father wants the child to be circumcised even though he's not being converted. Can you do it? And I said, and there was a dispute I mentioned between Israel Hildesheimer and Ratzirish Kalisher, and I said, I find it hard to believe that in Israel today they would allow this. The Moel in America, it's sort of like a free-for-all. Anyone can become a Moel. But in Israel, it's regulated, I gather. So Ben investigated it. Thank you, Ben. He says the rabbinate officially bans this type of Brit Milah. If someone, a Moel or doctor, goes and does it, he can, but the official policy is no bris when the mother's not Jewish. I guess that means that you're not going to get punished by the government if you do it, but it makes sense. You're going to start giving bris Milah to people who are for a Moel. If they want to do it themselves, they can do it themselves. But that creates an implication. You could say that they're Jewish. Okay, Rabbi Shalom Berger writes in, and he says that I mentioned Ramosha, he uses the word member and electricity instead of chaver, and I don't know if I said electricity, I think I said car, and Rabbi Yellen said also machine. He says that Ramosha certainly knew the words, but I was told that he was reluctant to use words like chaver and chashmal because they have meanings in biblical and rabbinic Hebrew that derive from their modern usage. Well, I actually searched on Otzer Chachma. Rav Moshe uses both of them. He uses chaver. So, for instance, I'm looking at a tshuva in Yeridea, volume 1, number 53. It's the Shaila. He says, "Uvidvar liyos chaver bevad harabani." So Rav Moshe used both member and chaver. I guess depends what year maybe. And he also uses chashmal. He uses electric and chashmal. So Rav Moshe was not like, these Zeda Haredi types that refuse to use the word chashmal because, I don't know, either Ben Yehuda created it or the Language Academy. He uses chashmal. I guess it just depended what was on his mind. And finally, one more thing from Rabbi Berger. And this will end with, call your attention to something about repeating words. Rabbi Berger says, I think he's spoken on Torah Motion before, right, Rabbi? Yeah. He says, anyone who davened at Yeshivas Har Etzion and heard Rav Amital as Chazan can attest that he led the tzibor in multiple repetitions of the word the Ne'emar during Chazaras Hashatz on Yamim Noraim. When he was asked about this practice, while he's repeating it, he said, Kach nahogu b'Hungaria k'shayiti tza'ir. Growing up in Hungary, this is what he heard. So, if you're a Litvish guy, you could say back to Rav Amital, okay, so you heard it. Big deal, you heard it. We know from the Aruch HaShulchan, and we'll see in Ramosha that people did it, but the Rabbanim didn't. Who said the Rabbanim liked it? But if you know Rav Amital, he's very attached to the masses. I wonder if he's influenced by Rav Kook. In my forthcoming book, I speak about Rav Kook sees in certain respects the Hamonam, the masses, as standing above the Torah scholars. It's really very subversive, what Rav Kook says. But it could be Rav Amital is getting some of this, but like, for example, a famous story I'll tell you about Rav Amital. It's recorded in the book that came out after his death. When his son was being bar mitzvah, I think that's Rav Yoel Amital. He's at Yeshiva Shalvim. So this is Rav Amital Senior is the grandson-in-law of Rav Zalman Meltzer, one of the great Gedolei Yisrael. So when his son was bar mitzvah, all the rabbis came and everything, and they're all saying, my bracha to the grandson, to the son, Rav Amital's son, I bless you, etc. You should follow in the path of your Alter Zaydi, your great grandfather, Rav Zalman Meltzer. Everyone was saying that to the bar mitzvah boy, you have such a yichus, and we hope that you follow in his path. Rav Amital gets up and says, I have to say, after hearing all these people wishing that my son will be like Rav Zalman Meltzer, following the path, I have to say that that's not my wish. My father wasn't a Gedolei Yisrael. The people I grew up with weren't Gedolei Yisrael. What my bracha to my son is that he be an Erlich Jew. That's what I want him to be. And then later he can become a Talmid Chacham. But the primary bracha I want him to be Erlich. And so Rav Amital, it fits in with Rav Amital. But I do want to tell you about a few words, just about repeating words, and I'll tell you what Moshe says, because I think it's really interesting. I mentioned it last class, but I was doing by memory, and I was happy to see that I actually remembered it perfectly. Sometimes I remember it 90% or even less. If you look in Ibras Moshe, Orach Chaim 2, Volume 2, number 22, he's asked the question, B'dvar chazonim shekoflin tevos v'inyanim b'emsa brachos. Chazonim who repeat. And Rav Moshe says, it's just like the Aruch HaShulchan. He says, Ein ruach chachamim nocha mehem. That is, the rabbis are not happy about this. They don't like it. However, and he says that the rabbis have already protested about this. It's not the first thing the rabbis protested the people didn't listen to. And he says, V'lo ho'ilu. It didn't help. So it's really amazing that we have to understand, why is it for a century the rabbis protesting this, it didn't help, and then all of a sudden, like in the late 80s, people start listening to the rabbis. I guess it's a sign of Meir Soloveitchik's thesis that the book culture versus the communal culture, the mimetic culture. In any event, so the rabbis today should stop complaining that no one listens to them. When you see that Rav Moshe and Aruch HaShulchan, they say no one listens to us, but today they do listen, and you don't even need the rabbi. You have all the machers in shul. If you try to repeat the words, they'll tell you. So Rav Moshe says even Chazanim Shomrei Torah do this. And he says, technically, it's not a problem, Rav Moshe says. It's not the best thing, but it's not a problem. So what's the difference? That means he tells someone not to, but if he does it, you don't have to make a big deal about it. He says, why? There's no hefsek here. There's only a hefsek. He said, there's no hefsek if you just repeat and do it in the Seder of Tefillah. And he gives an amazing proof for this, Rav Moshe. If you're davening, let's say you're davening Shemona Esrei, and you're saying Shema Koleinu Hashem Elokeinu Chus V'Rachem Aleinu, and all of a sudden, as you're davening, you realize, you're daydreaming. You say the words. We all have this experience, just like you're driving. You don't know how you got to someplace, but you're there. We're davening. All of a sudden, you look at where you are, and how'd you get there? Because your mind wasn't on it. You're supposed to repeat it. If I said Shema Koleinu Hashem Elokeinu Chus V'Rachem Aleinu, and I realized my mind wasn't focused, it's fine. I go back and I repeat it. And Rav Moshe, and you're supposed to do that. And Rav Moshe says that, he says, he says, even when it comes to brachos that you're yotzei, even without kavana, what does he say? You should go back and say it. That shows it's not a hefsek. Because if it was a hefsek, I wouldn't be able to go back and repeat it. Because at the end of the day, I'm yotzei. If I say Shema Koleinu, Refa'enu, whatever I'm saying, if I'm not really focusing 100%, I'm still yotzei. It's not the best, but I'm yotzei. So if it is hefsek to repeat, then I wouldn't be able to. But Rav Moshe says, no, of course you're supposed to go back and repeat it with kavana. That shows that it's not a hefsek. And repeating, it depends on how you're repeating. Why? And then Rav Moshe says, However, if you skip words and change the order, and he gives an example that I have to say I never heard growing up. I mentioned certain things I heard, but where is it? Uh, I pulled it up here. No, here. This is the example Ramosha gives in Shmona Esrei and Shabbos morning. Sorry, in the not Shmona Esrei, in before Kriyas Shema, Brachos Shema. I can say that I never heard a Chazan sing this. But listen to Rav Moshe says that they would, the Brach of Yotzer, this is how they would pronounce it. We say, Kihu Avadopo Ogavaros, Sechadashos, Baal Mochamos. And what does Rav Moshe say people would say? This is how they would read it. Kihu Avado, Hoel Gavaros. Kihu Avado, Osechadashos. Kihu Avado, Baal Mochamos. So there you have. You're repeating kihu levado with each little section there. That Rav Moshe says is forbidden, and that you can't do. And it's forbidden. The others, it's not the best thing. It's not a proper thing. But since we already see that it's not a proper thing, but it's not technically forbidden, we can imagine cases when even the rabbis wouldn't oppose it. And for this, I'm going to call your attention to a sefer called Torah Chaim by Rav Yaakov Sholem ben Chaim Sofer, a student of the Ksav Sofer, and he says as follows. This is on his Chuvas section Orach Chaim, number 53. He says as follows. Let me pull it up here where I find it. He says that in the Sfarim, this is the mid-19th century, they've already criticized the Chazanim who sing Shalom Chavot Shemayim. That is, they're just doing it to put a concert on for their own voice. So that's the sort of thing that, you can't repeat words. It's wrong. And then he says, and in our generation, they're doing something even worse that they didn't do in previous generations, the Chazanim. They're now repeating words. So in previous generations, the Rabbanim criticized the Chazanim because they turned it into a show. Now they're doing worse, and they're repeating words. And he says in Shmona Esrei and Kedusha, and then he says that one time in front of my Rebbe, that's Ksav Sofer, the Chazan repeated words in Kedusha, and Ksav Sofer Garbo MC Kedusha. He rebuked him in the middle of Kedusha. I'm not sure what. I guess you're allowed to speak if you need to. So he probably told him enough or whatever in the middle of Kedusha. But then he says that there are those, he quotes the Maram Shik, who also was against repeating words, he says, but I've heard people who reject them, Chuvas the Maram Shif, Shekama v'chama tzadiki bukdoshi malyonim, shehema shlichet tzibur, and what does he say? He says that we know that there are many tzadikim and great, kadoshi elyon, who when they are chazanim, kofling hatevos, they repeat the words. So how could the Maram Shik be so negative about repeating words? We know great tzaddikim. And he says, no one criticized this me'olam. And so what does the Sefer say here, the Torah Chaim? He says there's a difference. And he's explaining about the Maram Shik. When the Maram Shik criticizes them, he's criticizing people who are performing. And in performing, they repeat words. He doesn't mention Ramosha's point of going out of order, because even not going out of order, it's a problem, he's saying. But what he says, Misha kavana sola shamayim. If your intention is for the sake of shamayim, umerov havodav kavana, and you're involved in your kavana, and therefore your kofal tevos leka kfeda. He says if you do it as part of the spiritual, you say like Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu, something like that. You can imagine that's okay. And we know that the big Rabbanim used to do that. The Kadosh Elyon, he says. But the Chazanim who do it Shalom L'Shem Shemayim, just so that they have a good voice, Be'enei Ham, in front of the people, that's usher. So, I mean, what we have here, and I told you, one of the rabbis in my community, he's since passed away, but he was not a modern Orthodox trained person. He lived in a modern Orthodox community, but he was more he wasn't himself. I wouldn't call him modern Orthodox. When I asked him as a chutzpahdik little kid, I asked him, why do you repeat the words? I was before Bar Mitzvah. He says, when the Rabbanim say not to repeat words, they're not referring to what I'm doing. So what he meant was what I said, that is part of something to make it feel more meaningful. That would be okay. Now, with Ramosha doesn't make that distinction. Ramosha just says it's not appropriate, even though it's not forbidden. But we see and we know that there were many people who did it like this, and I don't know if Ramosha would oppose it if, in a case like I mentioned just now, when it's not done as a performance or sort. Okay, funny. Let's write. Today, I got an email from both my sons' yeshiva, a talk being given by Rav David Weinberg. I don't know if anyone knows this yeshiva Oraita, to have her to be the religious implications of Eric Fromm's philosophy. Strange class to have at a yeshiva, I guess, but Eric Fromm, I mean, I looked him up. He's I said he's what, the great grandson or something of Bamberger, but I say he's an atheist, but he must have religious implications. I know nothing about Eric Fromm, but I mentioned him last time, so I see that Rav Davidel, who really interesting person, Rav Davidel Weinberg. Yeah, he's the brother of Moshe C. Weinberg, I believe, he is the mashgiach at YU. But he published a volume of Rav Kook's writings. Interesting person. Okay, I want to now, in our concluding words about Rabbi Bamberger, this will take us to the end. I want to just continue with a few other things I want to call your attention to. Bamberger, obviously, old German family, and he kept very strongly to German minhagim, even in examples when other people did not hold so strongly. So, for instance, people in his kahila wanted to introduce the Sephardic practice, which became common in Eastern Europe, that everyone says Kaddish together, and he opposed this. I wonder, other than the Germans, are there any shuls we have today that, I assume Washington Heights doesn't do it, but the old Ashkenazic practice was one person says Kaddish. Each Kaddish, one person would say it. Not like us, where it's a free-for-all, we all say it. And in the best places, the mourners will at least stand together or near each other, and you try to say it at the same time. Otherwise, people are finishing at all different times. But I wonder, we have some Washington Heights people. Do they still hold to the old German practice of one Kaddish? Someone will type it in
Yes.
for me.
Only one person says Kaddish.
Yes.
Only one person says Kaddish. Okay. How it happened that all the rest of us who are from Litva and Poland and Romania, how we adopted, I guess everyone wanted, you know what? In the popular mind, Kaddish is important to raising the neshama. So therefore, you could see why people would say that, we all want an opportunity to say Kaddish. What do you do during the week? They pick one person each morning minyan?
No. There's one person says Kaddish.
Yeah.
And there are 3 Kaddishim that are said.
Yeah.
And on those days, if there are a lot of latecomers or they need another Kaddish, except for Monday and Thursday, before Chazar Hashatz, another will say Chatzi Kaddish and then say Baruch before they begin Chazar Hashatz. But if you
No, but let's say you have 5 Avelim. Who determines who gets it?
the Gabaim.
Okay. Okay, so I can see if someone's not going to say Kaddish, he'll miss out. He'll be upsetting too.
There's a whole Kadima in Flamed Bays.
Okay, you need good Gabaim. In our shows, no one knows. Everyone just comes in and says it. Nikki, yeah?
It was my understanding that Ashkenazim switched to the Sephardic system because there were actual fistfights in shuls, and the Rabbanim got together and decided that was it. And they agreed to switch to the Sephardic system. There were actual physical fistfights.
Makes sense, because I know that you have a number of chuvos that discuss this. Who has the kadima? Who's, just like today we wonder who davens for the omelet. There's chuvas who should say kaddish. So and especially when you throw in the idea, someone feels that it's important. He's giving respect to his parents. So I'm sure that's correct.
The Yavitz brings it down. He writes that in his introduction to his siddur, but in those 3 volumes you have from a Bamberger and Yeshiva, go to the 2nd volume on Westphalia, on the development of how it became throughout Eastern and Western Europe that more than one person said Kaddish, because it was part of the Napoleon's decrees, fraternity, equality, and
That's
And
right. I remember Hamburger because the quasi-reform rabbi in Westphalia, he instituted that also. Yes. Okay. Um, there was a practice in Würzburg that not just Würzburg, other places in Germany, we have Shchita. We all know what Shchita is, right? And you ask everyone, they say that religious Jews, cannot eat any meat from the hindquarters, and therefore we don't have that. But it's not true. You're allowed to eat meat. You just have to get rid of the fat, the chalef. It's called nikor. And nikor was done throughout history. It's still being done. You go to Israel, you can go to El Gaucho, other places. Here, look. The OU doesn't do it, but you can go here. You want to get it? Bisra Meats, highest quality kosher hindquarter meats by Rabbi Aviad Elkin under the hashgacha of Rabbi Elio Ben Chaim. And you can buy it if you want. Rav Moshe says there's no issue. Rav Moshe says there's no minhag not to eat it. It's just that it does not worth the effort because they could sell it to the non-Jews. So it's not worth the effort, and people didn't want it. He says there's no minhag not to eat it. It's just that people didn't. If it was a minhag for Ashkenazi not to eat it, then it would be a problem to start eating it. Rav Moshe says there's no minhag in Israel. It's under hashgacha. What I would only say is that Rav Moshe is speaking about Lithuania, other places. In Germany, in some places, there, as far as I can tell, there was indeed a minhag not to eat it. Maybe because it's hard and you need to be trained for it. And we know that there were some Kehilos that wanted to institute Nikor because everyone used to do it. If you want to learn about this this porging, the word is porging, Porge. As far as I know, the word porge only means one thing, to remove the fat in kashrus. So I don't know who invented this word, this English word, porging. This is a big deal in the controversy over shchita in England, because in England they would sell meat that wasn't porged, and it was your responsibility to go. You'd go to the butcher, you'd buy the meat there, and then you had to go next door inside the butcher shop. You'd have to go to the guy whose job, the menaker, the porger. And this was the system that was under the hashgacha, even under Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky, although eventually he got rid of it. And the idea was that you take it yourself and go, no different than when we were all growing up. You'd see the meat in the store. It would be your job to kosher it when you get home. Today, no one knows how to kosher anything. They don't even allow meat to be sold that isn't kosher. The problem was that a lot of these people would go to the store, they'd buy the meat, and they'd figure, well, it's shechted, and then they would just take it home and eat it without it being porged. So if you look here on Rabbi Ari Zivotofsky, a number of years ago, wrote this article. He has these articles in Jewish Action. So he writes about Nikor and the whole practice of Nikor, and he deals with the Jerusalem and Rav Moshe and Rav Chaim Ozer Grzinski, and okay, you don't, and he states at the end that Rav Moshe says it's a sin to forget a section of the Torah. So Ari Zivotofsky says that therefore, if we forget the laws of Nikor, that's a sin. You can get it in Philadelphia as well. So if you want tenderloin, you want sirloin, you want the real thing that the Goyim like. I'm a chicken person. I go to steakhouse, I get chicken, so I was never much attracted to it. But Bamberger is opposed to it. He says, let me read you. This is mentioned. Hamburger in his biography of Rabbi Bamberger, page 565, he says, he has a statement there. He says that that our forefathers nahagu isur l'nakera charayim. He says that we do have a practice, a minhag, unlike what Ramosha says. And he says this is, he thought because they saw that a mechshala could arise. That is, you have to be expert. And not everyone is expert at it. And therefore, we have enough meat as it is. Well, why take the chance? But what he's doing is he's upholding the German minhag. That's what Rabbi Bamberger is doing. He's not inventing this on his own. He's saying this was the minhag. Unlike Ramosha, in Lithuania and Russia, they did do Nikor. So,
Rav Bamberger has a sefer on shchita called Moral Zvachim.
Yeah. I don't know if he even deals with Nikor because they didn't do Nikor. So, yes, he has a sefer on. We spoke about that actually. Thank you. The minhag in German, among at least in his area of Germany, was not to do weddings on Rosh Chodesh Sivan during Sfira. And again, people wanted to get rid of it, but at least as far as I know, in us non-German Jews, we do it on Rosh Chodesh. Don't we do it on Rosh Chodesh weddings? Yes. Okay. So he's really standing al hamishmar, as they said, protecting German minhagim. But he had many of his own minhagim. In fact, not just minhagim, but hanhagot is the term, maybe pious things beyond the letter of the law, something which no one else would be required to do in his mind, but he did it because of his special piety. In Hamburger's biography, he lists, I don't know, like 86 of these practices. Let me just read you a couple of them, a few of them. Number 30 on his list. Do you know that Rabbi Bamberger did not eat gebrocks? From the time that they started with, I know when they started with machine matzah, which he thought is much better, then he permitted his household to eat it, but he never did. In other words, he thought there's always a big problem about matzah. Is machine matzah better? Many of the rabbis opposed machine matzah among the Hasidim, but the non-Hasidim said, on the contrary, machine matzah is better. It's more kosher. So when they only had hand matzah, but Rabbi Bamberger's house, they would not eat because the fear is it gets wet. Maybe there's something in there, and then it leads to chametz. There's something inside the matzah wasn't totally baked. But when they had machine matzah, which was 100% better as far as he's concerned, everyone else could eat now gebrocks, but he did not eat gebrocks. What are the Ashkenazi Rabbanim? Don't eat gebrocks. Now, you guys who go to your Pesach programs, have your Pesach programs, you can't have gebrocks because they want to appeal to the Hasidim. But there's still some good Pesach programs there that are proudly following the Vilna Gaon, the Mishnah Berurah, Rav Moshe, and the rest of them. And, we get our matzah balls. We're not falling into that trap, which kashrus often is, that you have to raise the standards so much so that you get everyone, which means that I already told you about peanuts. Once the OU stopped certifying peanuts and peanut oil, you should bring, if you're from Lithuania or one place that have peanuts, you should bring peanuts to your Seder table each night and hand them out. Otherwise, everyone's minhag is going to be no peanuts. So, but that's an example of the sort of pious things that a gadol, all our gadolim have these practices. Every gadol I know of has individual pious practices that they do, and they don't tell anyone else to do it. And that's an interesting one. Let me read you a couple more. Number 40 on the list. He was makpid to sleep in the sukkah even in his older age, and he didn't rely on the heter that it's cold. And Germany can be cold, sukkahs. And he insisted on sleeping there, even as an elderly man. That wasn't really the general practice, but we're not, that's what he did. He could have had a heter, but he didn't want it. Number 66, and this I love. I wonder if our Germans, our Yekis, can give us other examples of this, because I didn't know about this. He called, he had a lot of sons, we saw. One of his sons he called Yitzhak. How could he call his son Yitzhak? He's Yitzhak. No, he's Yitzhak Dov. He called his son Yitzhak. I don't know what middle name he had, because that was the name of his father-in-law. And as long as he doesn't call him Yitzhak Dov, it's okay. You can call him Yitzhak. But and we know that in the note here it says that among the continued descendants in his family, they continued this practice on half a name, not a full name. You don't name a full name, but for us, it would be very strange because we don't really usually use the second name. A couple other of these practices of Rav Bamberger. Look at, here's number 77. He was makpid. I don't want to offend anyone here, but he was makpid that women should not go to the cemetery during the Levaya. And you know that this is, or maybe you don't know, this is a practice in certain German cemeteries. In the cemetery in Zurich, for instance, I think there are cemeteries in Jerusalem. Did Rabbi Bamberger invent this? Not at all. Let me show you something. Here, where are we here? I pulled it up before. Shulchan Aruch. And the Ramah doesn't disagree. Women should be withheld from following the bier to the cemetery. This is Yeridea 359. Now, what's this based on? It's actually based on a Zohar. It says that if men look at the women when they return from the cemetery, that cemetery, I'll get you in a second, Nick, you just say it causes some men to die before their time. So I've been to lots of funerals, unfortunately. I've never been to a cemetery where women don't go, but I know there are. I know there are. What, Nikki? Yes.
I'm from Belgium, and
Yeah.
I was not permitted to go to my mother's burial to the cemetery, and the Manhattan Chevra Kadisha is from Manhattan, New York. From the Moria will not permit women to go ad hayom hazeh,
To
including
a funeral. Yeah.
no, to the basic forum, to the
You
cemetery.
mean go to the cemetery even when it's not a funeral?
Yeah, no, when the funeral you go to the
Yeah.
funeral,
Okay.
but then you're not permitted to go actually to the burial. You cannot
Okay.
go
That would be
on the cemetery
now.
itself.
Well, where was your mother buried? In Belgium or over the border?
No, right in Westbury, Beth Israel Cemetery.
Okay, no, because in Belgium I know they go over the border and they bury them. They can't bury them now in Antwerp. They bury them over the border. Yeah.
No, this was
Uh, in America, yeah. Okay. So that's news to me in America. I didn't even know about this. Does
today.
Washington Heights do this?
That I
I
don't
don't
know,
think
but
so.
I know that
No.
Maria,
I don't
anyone,
know. We have a Washington Heights person. You could tell us if they do that. I don't know. I haven't heard about Washington Heights.
In general, the women do not go to the Beis HaKvaros for the Kvur.
Okay, this is really interesting. And
In
he held of this.
in Monkshule in London, for many years. I don't know what the practice is now, but certainly until about 30 years ago, it was the practice that women could not go to the cemetery for a burial. And there was a certain figure who, his name I won't mention, internationally known, who had only daughters. And when he passed away, there was a huge row between the rabbi and the daughters at the just before the burial, because the daughters demanded that they be allowed to go.
In Israel, there was a problem because some of these Chevra Kadisha didn't allow women to speak, and there was a revolt in the last 20 years. And if you're going there, it's your parent. You don't. Who are these people? And they can't tell you what to do. And I know that now basically they stand off to the side. They don't interfere. I've heard this from people who told me that what the difference today and what they used to. And also, there were places in Israel they didn't let sons. Now, firstborn, maybe only the firstborn son. I think only the firstborn son would not go to the basic pharos for the funeral. This has to do with Kabbalistic things. I think it's only the firstborn son, although I forget. Meir Benayahu has a whole long essay on this practice. It has to do with, well, I don't need to get into the details, but children who weren't born and are going to take their revenge. And finally, the last one, Hikpid al Gezel Goy. He was very makpid, as all German Orthodox Jews, in matters of Dine Mamonot. He was very careful on thievery of non-Jews. So much so, and what I'm going to tell you now, it's said about the Chafetz Chaim also, when he sent a letter through a messenger, that is not by sending it in the post, just gave it to someone, he would rip up the stamp. I mean, which is strange. And the same strange about the Chafetz Chaim also. They said the Chafetz Chaim did the same thing, but why would you rip up the stamp? You only use a stamp when you send it through the post office. If you're not through the post office, then what's the point? You're not using anything. So what's the answer they say about the Chafetz Chaim? I guess it applies here. It's Chasidus. It's a type of Chasidus. I can't understand. It's beyond me. I can't even approach that level, but it's a type of Chasidus that they feel in a certain sense they're stealing from. It's hard for us normal people to understand this, but people of a much higher madrega than us, they see things that we don't see. A couple other things I want to mention. And this might upset some of you who are very much into Tanakh, because one of the great figures, my son is actually infatuated with him. He's doing a senior thesis, I think, at YU on him, is this individual, Samuel David Luzzatto, Shmuel David Luzzatto, known as Shadal. I think there's another picture. Here's a picture of him. I remember the first time I learned about Shadal was through Nechama Leibowitz. She would cite him a lot. What a commentator. What a genius of genius, Shadal. We should have classes on him. Such a fascinating individual. They're reprinting all his Sfarim now in Israel. This guy, Bashai, I think his name is, and J.J. Kimchi, who runs the podcast, The Jewish Ideas. I highly encourage everyone to listen to it. He is coming out with a translation of with notes of Shadal's Vikuach, his work on Kabbalah, Vikuach Kabbalah. So when Shadal was a great defender of traditional Judaism against, he went a little far. He attacks the Rambam, but he attacks the reformers. He had all sorts of strange sayings. He said that we're interested in Tanakh, T-N-A-K, not Kant, K-A-N-T. And he battled against Geiger and the rest of them. However, he had views that are unquestionably either borderline Orthodox or even non-Orthodox, and which he published. And when he passed away, Rabbi Mazuz, we just saw the pasuk I showed you earlier, from which we read during davening, Osa Chadashas Ba'al Mochamos. That's what Ramazuz says about his Shadal, that he does he does a mochama, which is good against the reformers, but he also makes his own chadashos, new things. So when Shadal passed away, I think he passed away 1865, as I recall. Well, I'll see right now. I'll check. 1860 to 1865 is my recollection. Yes. So there was all sorts of articles about him, his greatness, including in Halavanon. Halavanon was an Orthodox, important Orthodox paper that all the Gedolim and thinkers used to publish in. And Rabbi Bamberger publishes an open letter, I have it right here, in which he says that I want to point something out. And that's, although you had this, the eulogy about Shadal, and you portray them as Echad Mitzadike v'Chasidei Gonei Ador. And he says, I just want to point out some things to you that he writes that would show you that we should not regard him as one of the Chasidei Gonei Ador. And it's true. It's Shadal's a great figure, but to put him in the category of Gedolim when he says things that are, are controversial. Let's put it that way. And he mentions this even though when he deals with Wesley, Naftali Hirsch Weisel, here he is, one of the people from the Mendelssohn circle. Here's Weisel. He refers to him as Hachacham refers to Weisel Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So Rabbi Bamberger loved Wesley. On the other hand, he had a problem with Shadal, which is unusual, I think. The last thing I want to mention, and then I'll get to your comments, is in his tshuvos. I was going to go give other examples of the tshuvos, but then I said we want to finish it today. 12 classes, it's enough. I mean, we could do many more, but I think we got a good understanding of him. But listen to this one. In one of the shuls in Germany, you had one Levi in the little community. In Germany, sometimes they had small communities. He didn't want to pay membership. For whatever reason, maybe he was in a fight. He's going to shul, but he's not paying up his dues. I mean, we could have that in our shuls. We don't have kehilas like they used to have, but we have minyanim. Sometimes people come to shachris. Okay, they come for a week, a month, etc. If they've been coming now for 6 months, if they don't want to be a member, someone's going to go up to them and say, well, you got to make a donation. You can't just come that's how the shuls exist. Okay, well, this guy didn't want to pay his membership. And the shul said, we don't want to call him up for Levi. We just want to do Kohen, either, so you can do Kohen twice, or just Kohen, then Yisrael. No, Kohen twice. You do Kohen twice. We don't want to call him up for Levi because he's not a member of our Kehillah. And Rabbi Bamberger says, you still have to call him up after Kohen. You can take action against him. You can, if he's obligated to, I think as I recall, he says he says in Yad HaLevi, or number 16, volume 1, I think he even says you can go to the government because if he's a member of the community, he has to pay. You can do whatever you want to do to try to force him to pay, but if he's sitting there, you have to give him Levi. because it's not him per se. It's his tribe, I guess. He gets it. Um, let me see the comments and questions, and then I'll say some. Well, first, before I see the comments and questions, I don't want to forget. I thank you all again for being with me for these 3 months, 12 classes. I think it was really great learning about Rabbi Bamberger. I never thought we'd do 12 classes. Granted that about 5 of those classes or 6 of them were dealing with Austrit, but since he is so connected to Austrit, it was very important to get into that. Jacob says, wasn't a Radox Ta Rafa more like a th in thumb? I always assume so, but the problem is that he says here that's before I saw what he says, that they pronounce the shin with the sin, as we call it. They pronounce it like the tough. Were they pronouncing the shin? I'm you know what? I'm going to look for next class when I'm going to look and see what the scholars have to say about Radox. That's the Ammonites would say that, but I'll see what I can find out about Radak, his tough without Agesh. But I don't think so, based upon that Radak, but we'll see. Rabbi Hartman says, a major Orthodox shul in the Bronx, Madiden Jewish Center, like David Hollander, did not have Bima in the center. Well, there's a lot of Orthodox shuls don't have it. Ramosha was asked about this, and Ramosha said the Hungarians made a decree because they were in the battle against the reform, and the reform were changing it. But if you're not today, it's not relevant, Ramosha said, because we're not battling against the reformers over Bima B'emtza. So when you speak halacha l'maisa, unless I guess you're Hungarian and you're attached to this, it's not an issue anymore. The Rambam says Bima B'emtza, but the Kesef Mishnah says that's because they can hear you best there. But it's not halacha. So I granted, if you're Hungarian, it's an issue, and we know that some people maybe have an issue, but we have lots of Orthodox shuls that don't have the bima in the middle. Chaim says, as to forbidden migdalim per Reb Adam Mintz, one of the things Reform wanted and did was build shuls with bell towers. Yes, they did. I mentioned that when in the Reform classes, I mentioned that. And so I think that's what the migdal is here, the steeple, even though they wouldn't have bells. Exactly. But here it's better because in Pressburg, where the Ksav Sofer was, they rebuilt the shul, and lo and behold, they built it with like a bell tower, a tower of sorts. But it was once they realized what's going on, that there was a tower that the Ksav Sofer said it would cost too much money to destroy it. He allowed it to go up, even though he was very unhappy with it. Rabbi Yellen says the Maram Shik would not sign the letter from the Rabbanim that anyone who violated the Hungarian Tukos was a terrible person. Yes, the Maram Shik went along with it, but he didn't take to the extreme. You say, I think that's kind of said they were like Ovdei Avodah Zarah or some other very derogatory term. Well, it goes on for a couple pages, and let me see, I have here the page, and they say, I don't know if it says Avodah Zarah or just like you reject God or something like that. I don't know the exact language. I don't want to take they speak about, that these new people are coming, they're violating the law, they're the Yetzer Hara, they want to be like the non-Jews, like the Goyim. They want to akor das Yehudis. So anyone who's not going to be in the middle or wearing the gown, you're trying to uproot Torah Judaism. You're violating, it says, following in the paths of the non-Jews, etc., etc. They might even say, well, they're saying they're following like the Christians. So that's, I guess, you could Ovdei Avodah Zarah. Exactly. The Maram Shik in Hungary was in the middle. He was actually a moderate. The extremists were people like Gil Lichtenstein, and believe it or not, who signed this? The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Shlomo Gansfried was one of the extremists. Rav Israel Hildesheimer was on the left. So when you think about it here, you have Israel Hildesheimer on the left, the Maram Shik in the middle as a moderate, but the extremists won. And he said that he has to go along with them. Rav Hillel Lichtenstein was so extreme that when the extremists in Jerusalem put his son-in-law, the Leifa Ivri, the Rakiv Yosef Sessions, are in Cherem, rather than come to his son-in-law's defense, he says, I have to investigate, see what's going on here, why they put him in Chayrim, because maybe he put him in Chayrim too, I guess. Rav Hillel Lichtenstein writes, another moderate is the Ksav Sofer in Pressburg. Rav Hillel Lichtenstein writes a terribly strong letter to Rav Hillel Lichtenstein, to about Pressburg. One to the Ksav Sofer and one to someone else, and he writes about Pressburg. He goes, Eicha haya, like the words Eicha. How did this great city Pressburg become what it became? Because in Pressburg, the Ksav Sofer appointed a German language preacher. And his own father, in his ethical will, said you can't have a vernacular preacher. The decree which we read, Mikhailovitz, that in that matter was just repeating what the Chasam Sofer said. And the Ksav Sofer goes against his father, but the Ksav Sofer said, if my father was alive, he would have also appointed, because he can't appoint. It's like today having a Yiddish preacher in a show where no one speaks Yiddish. But so they were very angry. The Ksav Sofer brought Israel Hildesheimer, and he wanted him to be assistant rabbi. Rabbi Kelman says, might Rav Kook have been influenced by Solomon Schechter and Catholic Israel? He wasn't. It's a very similar idea, but he didn't know about Solomon Schechter. I'm sure of that. But you can derive this. He knew about Frankel. We said Frankel spoke about the same thing in the classes on Frankel. I gave you an example where Rav Kook says the same thing Zachariah Frankel said. I also don't think he's influenced by Frankel. It's in the Gemaras, the idea of a holy community. And someone sent me something from a Breuer on the Shul Choir, but I'll take a look at it afterwards. I still don't know if you know what's the difference between a Mashorer and a choir. I'm not sure what the difference is.
The Mashorerim were part of the tefillah with the chazan. They sang along with the chazan during the tefillah per se. The choir was an accompaniment for the kahal to participate in the tefillah and sing together, but the Mashorerim were standing next to the chazan and part of the tefillah, the chazos hashatz, and the actual tefillah.
Okay, so you're saying the choir? If the choir is just being with the chazan, that's not a choir?
No, the choir is an accompaniment for the whole shul to be able to sing.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you. For years I've been wondering this. Thank you.
I think you'll see that in the article.
Yes, Chaim Soloveitchik wrote about mimesis, exactly. And someone says, tell me privately to look at Leon Wieseltier's book Kaddish. Leon Wieseltier wrote a book all about Kaddish. I know Leon Wieseltier. And Rabbi Kelman says, Webster's dictionary defines porridge to make a slaughtered animal ceremonially clean by removal of the forbidden fat, sinews, according to Jewish ritual. Yes, but someone in England had to invent this word porridge when they decided to do nikkur. And it doesn't have any other meaning. It's like you can't use the word porridge to remove veins just because if you're Italian and you want to do it. It's only Jewish ritual is porridge. While I'm doing this, if you can try to get the etymology, I don't know. If not, I'll get it later. Paul says, here it is. Paul says, thank you, Paul. Oxford English Dictionary, the origin is Yiddish portion. So what does that mean, portion? Removal, I guess, from the word like lifrosh or something, maybe. Parish. That we know that we have the word parish. Separate. Okay, it seems unlikely. It's a bit of a stretch, but I don't know. And Bina says a lot of Hasidim don't allow women to burials. Thank you for that. I didn't know. And Paul says back in England, until about 10 years ago, only United Synagogue rabbis were allowed to speak at funerals. You mean the children cannot speak? Even the male children? It's good I can say they got rid of that formality. It's Jacob says regarding sons going to father's funeral, it's not just first sons, it's all children. Okay, thank you, Jacob. It's not all children, it's all sons. The issue is sons. It's not the daughters, at least not what I'm thinking about. Franco MJ says Shadal didn't have a problem with lower biblical criticism. There's a well-known emendation suggestion from Yecheskel. Yes, he basically did not touch Torah, but Nach, 100%, he was involved in emendations. Baron Kavodo, Baruch, I forget that one. Someone asked about what I made of postage stamps and the Chavetz Chaim. It's recorded in Sfarim about the Chavetz Chaim. Again, I don't know if it's a true story. The fact is, you have the exact same story about as we just saw Rabbi Bamberger. Sometimes these Gedolim stories, you have the same story about 4 or 5 different Gedolim. So presumably it's right about one, but then it gets transferred to another one. As Beryl Wine said, we don't know if it happened, but we know they don't tell these stories about you and me. The same story is told about the Chavetz Chaim, that if he would give a letter to someone, like he's in Rodin and someone's going to Kovno, he gives him a letter saying, deliver this to Rabbi Yochanan, he would take a stamp and throw it out. That's the story that's recorded. If you watch the video on the Rav, I don't know if you can get it anymore. They should put it online now. The Rav, the hour-long, hour-and-a-half documentary, whereby J.J. Schachter tells a story that the Rav said, he met someone and someone asked him, like, when do you have time to do all the secular studies? And he said, during the time when you guys are talking about me, that's when I learn it. Well, I know that, but that's really recorded about Israel Hildesheimer in Hungary. That one of the extremist Hungarian rabbis came to Hildesheimer and he was very impressed by him. He said he's a Gadol and Shas and Poskim. He says, how do you have time where do you know all the secular knowledge? He goes, all the time you guys are spending bad-mouthing me, that's when I'm doing secular studies. So you see how these stories get passed from one to the other. But it's not the Rav. I never heard the story about the Rav till J.J. Schachter mentioned that. The story about Rav Israel Hildesheimer is mentioned already. It's probably 100 years old. It's in the sources. So that's where it began. And Rabbi Kalman says Marty Lokshin gave talks on Shadal. And Morris Firestein, yes, the funeral customs are Kabbalistically connected. Yes, thank you for that. Absolutely. And in fact, Ben Neyahu has it's more than an essay, it's a whole book in which he deals with the idea of the sons. I think it's just the sons not going to the funerals and all that sort of thing. Zev says, why did they ask the Kohanim to step out for a moment and then call it Yisrael? Good question. I don't know. It could be that in Germany you don't do this. In the Hasidic world, you don't just ask them, you can tell them. The Munchas Elazar has a tshuva there. He says that if you want, you can order the Kohen out. That is, you got to give it to this Yisrael. He gave good money or whatever it is. I don't know if in the German they would follow this practice of certainly not, you can't order people out, but even asking people to leave. I don't know if, but and finally,
Levi a lesson.
Yeah.
That would teach that Levi a lesson.
It would. He doesn't mention it though. The Rabbi Bamberger. Daniel says that we got married in 2021 in L.A. and the rabbi followed the Hungarian minhagim. He wouldn't allow the chuppah to be in the sanctuary, and instead you had it in the social. You were the first wedding in that building. When you come to Hungary with me this summer, we'll see where they set it up outside. But look, there were people who were not even Hungarians. The Rav didn't like going to, or Salvation didn't like going to weddings inside synagogues. There's other people who didn't, but it's basically been accepted. And MJ Franco has good yichus because his great-grandfather, Yatevlev of signed Hungarian psak, but your great-great-grandfather was also refused to join the Orthodox organization. Because he thought that they were too, I guess, Ashkenazic, not Hasidic, right?
That's correct. However, when he and his son, the Kedushas Yantuf, also was status quo until he wanted his son to succeed him, and then through some political machination, he agreed it was a political trade-off, and it's too complicated to.
Okay. Well, one day, hopefully, you'll tell me. But you know what? You say status quo, which is one thing. In the Belzer Rebbe moves to Munkach in the early part of 20th century. Yes. And the Machokas that went on there, he technically was a neolog. He couldn't be Orthodox because the Munkacher was. So he technically became neolog. And finally, last comment, Rabbi Shudnow says Rabbi Ben Amozig was deep in Kabbalah, Shadal was completely out of it, and Rabbi Ben Amozig wrote a whole sefer, Tam Lashad, against Shadal. He showed him great respect, but against Shadal in defense of Kabbalah, yes, both in Italy. So with this, first time ever, we actually finished 9:31, close enough. Again, thank you very much. It was a great semester. I learned so much from all of you, like Pirkei Avos says, right? You learned most from the students, and at least in this hour, I learned from you. So you're my students, at least in this hour, but I learned so much from all of you. So I really enjoyed it very much. And Rabbi Kelman, final words.
Okay. Have a safe trip a good trip. You'll tell us all about it, and we'll resume
Yes.
either in 2 or 3 weeks. We will let you know when we hear. But as we mentioned right at the beginning, we'll be talking on the Musar controversy. But in the meantime, we'll have all our regular classes through the week, etc. But not next Monday night. And of course, I'll put up again. I've been sort of announcing our program on coping and resilience on Sunday. Unfortunate, I would say, whatever, but it's really, I think, some amazing speakers, very
Yeah,
powerful
and especially
program.
Rabbi Perez, Doran Perez. What
Durham Paris,
strength
of
he
course,
has.
who's tragically, I'm sure many of you know, his son is a hostage in Gaza. His other son got injured. That was the story. Got married. He was injured, then he got married, went back to the army, and one son is missing in Gaza. They think as a hostage, and of course, he's the one who put Mizrahi back on the map. Durham Paris has brought Mizrahi up. So we know him from our trip to South Africa many years ago. And of course, my wife's family is South African. So her first cousin is good friends with him. And he's a great guy. And this is obviously terrible what he's going through, but just in general. So he'll be speaking Eli Beer from United Hatzalah. Then we have psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. Really, it should be whatever. It's an important program. So that'll be this Sunday from 9:15 to 2:15. Come for whatever you can come. Part of it, all of it.
I say, Rabbi Kelman, someone asked me, I was watching this Neturei Karta, their rallies, and I said to this person, because he asked me about it, he's the one he sent me some of the videos. We know you can identify a Jew if they're Rahmanim, if they identify the Jewish people. I wonder, halacha l'maisa, if you can count these people to a minyan, if you can rely on their kashrus. Anyone today who does not feel the pain can look at it and not feel like our world. You have to wonder if these people are Jewish or if it's just they're in costume or something.
My nephew, if I can say, my nephew works at a startup in Toronto. They invest in Israel. The guy owns it, Israel. I don't know everything they're doing with some high tech stuff, whatever. And 30 people burst into their office this week. They have part of it on film. Half of them were Jews, non-Jews. Genocide, Palestine, and they filmed it. So they called the police. It took them 40 minutes to get there. Then police, there wasn't any violence, but I saw some of the things. He said some of the people, one person was very shaken up. He was very calm. He was talking to them and trying to argue with them and whatever. It's really amazing. So they have a criminal lawyer now looking into it to see if they can press charges, whatever they're covering their face. But half of them are Jewish. So I said to Josh, I said, how was the Achenu B'nai Israel? Sort of half jokingly. So he said to me right away, I wouldn't consider them Achenu B'nai Israel. In other words, these are Jews supporting Palestine from the river to the sea and genocide and all the
support Hamas, walking with Hamas, and it's such a.
And so one of them said, it's on tape. One of them said, he sent me the whatever. My grandparents are survivors from the Holocaust, so big deal, like you said. Whatever they said, that doesn't give you any credibility. It's sad. It's tragic. I don't know. It's terrible. I don't know anything more than anybody here. I think part of it is lack of education, but just a small part. I think some of these people, maybe not the nutcases, they don't know. Half the people don't even know what it means from the river to the sea. They have no understanding.
They have no idea. They've had them on video. They don't know what river, what sea. They don't know anything.
Right. Did you see?
But I just wanted to say that because the person might be listening who I said that I really, but the Neturei Karta is the worst because at least supposedly they're religious or it just means someone who doesn't have a Jewish heart. You could drink Chol Yisrael and super glad kosher, but if you don't feel the pain when you see parents who've lost a child, when you see Rav Maidan's son, no legs, and how he has such a piece of a friendly face and he's happy with it. But when that doesn't tear at your heart, they can't be Jews if you can look at that and not feel anything. That's what I answered to the person who asked me this question. That it's hard to see them as having any. You don't have to be religious. Most Jews are not religious, but we all know we come together at times because we feel for one another. If you don't feel, if you're a Polish Minat Tzibor, then you're not part of us. That's all that's but okay, that's
Yeah.
politics.
I
don't
agree.
care,
Listen,
baby.
as Rav
Thank you.
Soloveitchik pointed out many times, the first thing you say to a convert is to identify as a Jew. You know, if you know the Gemara in Yevamot there, of course,
Yes,
Gemara says,
because they oppressed us, because
and
we're
then
oppressed
if
and
he
we
says
suffer.
yes, Mekabli no Tomiyad, you immediately accept him. Then you teach a mitzvah. But before mitzvah is the identification as a Jew, and that's very important.
Satmar have
What?
the Turei Kata problem?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Does Satmar have the Turei Kata problem?
No, Satmar is different.
Correct.
Satmar cries over they would cry over, the Rebbe would cry. I mean, they're very upset. And any Satmar person I know, and I know a bunch of them, would feel the pain of the parents, 100%. They have a different hashkafa, but these people don't care. They're different.
Okay.
Satmar has problems, but they're not. We have to be honest with them. Okay, everyone, I'm off. So I have a lot of things I need to do still. God willing, God will watch over me, and I'll make it back. And see you guys soon.
Great trip.
Okay,
Successful in Japan.
Be well, everybody. Looking forward to learning with you. We should hear good news. That's
Amen. Amen. Be amen.
the simplest for Israel. We should have the Zohar to celebrate. Okay, be well, everybody. Lila Tov.
All right.